Have you ever witnessed a single act of kindness change a life forever? Poor black girl gives sandwich to millionaire in disguise. He shows up in a Rolls-Royce and changes her life forever. Luciana watched the man sitting on the park bench in shabby clothes with a distant look on his face. Something about him seemed different from the other homeless people in the neighborhood. Maybe it was his eyes, a deep blue that contrasted with his tan skin and unkempt beard. Or maybe it was the way he maintained a certain dignity even in his torn clothes. Without hesitation, the 12-year-old girl walked up to him and held out half of her sandwich. "You look hungry," she said simply. The man looked surprised, as if he wasn't used to being noticed. "This is your lunch, isn't it?" he asked in a deep but gentle voice. "It's only half." "I'm not really that hungry," Luciana lied, her stomach protesting silently. It was her only meal that day. Since her grandmother had fallen ill, things had become even more difficult. "Are you ready for an unexpected twist that will leave you speechless?" Reluctantly, the man accepted the sandwich. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Luciana shrugged. "My grandmother always says that sharing is more important when we have little." She noticed how his hands, despite the dirt, seemed well cared for. Strange for someone who lived on the streets. "What's your name?" he asked, studying her intently. "Luciana. Luciana Ribeiro. I live over there." She pointed to the dilapidated housing project across the square. The man bit into the sandwich slowly, as if savoring every bite. "This is the best sandwich I've ever had." Luciana smiled. "It's just peanut butter. It's all we had left in the cupboard this week." Suddenly, a siren sounded in the distance, and the man tensed. "I have to go," he said, putting the rest of the sandwich in his pocket. "Thank you, Luciana Ribeiro." 3 days later, Luciana was returning from school when she noticed something extraordinary. A silver Rolls-Royce was parked in front of her building, as out of place in that poor neighborhood as a unicorn would be in a supermarket parking lot. A man in an elegant suit was talking to curious neighbors. When he saw Luciana, he smiled and walked toward her. "Are you Luciana Ribeiro?" he asked formally. She nodded, confused. She had never seen this man before in her life. "My name is Marcus Silva, attorney for Mr. Eduardo Vizcaínos, CEO of Vizcaínos Enterprises." The name meant nothing to Luciana. "My client would like to speak with you and your legal guardian." He looked around. "Are your parents home?" Luciana felt the familiar lump in her throat. "I don't have parents. I live with my grandmother, but she's in the hospital." The lawyer seemed momentarily taken aback. "I see. Is there an adult responsible for you at this time?" "Mrs. Denise from 3B keeps an eye on me while my grandmother is in the hospital," she replied, pointing to the building. As they climbed the rickety stairs, Luciana wondered why a rich man would have any interest in her. Was this some kind of mistake? A cruel joke? "Why does this Eduardo want to talk to me?" she finally asked. Marcus smiled enigmatically. "He said you gave him something very valuable recently." Luciana frowned. "Impossible. I don't know any Eduardo." When they arrived at 3B and explained the situation to Mrs. Denise, the lawyer excused himself to make a phone call. Seconds later, he handed the phone to Luciana. "Hello, Luciana," said a familiar voice on the other end of the line. "I believe you gave me half of your peanut butter sandwich 3 days ago." Luciana's jaw dropped as realization hit her. The homeless man from the park. The same intense blue eyes, now in the voice of a millionaire. What no one in that forgotten neighborhood could have imagined was that simple shared sandwich would be the beginning of an extraordinary journey. A story where the genuine generosity of a child abandoned by society would defy all odds and reveal truths about kindness that many adults had long forgotten. If this story about an act of selfless compassion touched your heart, subscribe to the Black Voices channel to discover how a moment of true human connection can spark transformations that even a billionaire's money alone couldn't buy. "Is that Eduardo?" Luciana asked, looking at the photo on Marcus Silva's cell phone. On the screen, a well-dressed man with a neatly trimmed beard smiled at a charity event. Except for his piercing blue eyes, he looked unrecognizable compared to the homeless man in the square. Precisely, confirmed Marcus. My client conducts what he calls social experiments to understand how people really are when they don't know who is in front of them. 2 days later, Mrs. Denise accompanied Luciana to Eduardo Vizcaino's mansion on the outskirts of the city. The girl had never seen anything like it. An imposing gate opened automatically for the silver Rolls-Royce, revealing a winding path through immaculate gardens. "Remember," whispered Mrs. Denise, "don't touch anything expensive." "How am I supposed to know what's expensive?" retorted Luciana. "Everything here looks expensive." The interior of the mansion was even more impressive. What surprised Luciana most, however, was the simplicity of the man who welcomed them. Eduardo Vizcaino, dressed in a casual shirt and jeans, did not look like the magnate who ran one of the largest business conglomerates in the country. "Luciana," he smiled. "Thank you for coming. I wanted to meet you properly." During lunch, served by a discreet staff, Eduardo explained that he had grown up in extreme poverty before building his empire. "Once a year, I spend a few weeks living as someone invisible to society," he explained. "It's my way of not forgetting where I came from and observing the true nature of people." Luciana listened attentively, while Mrs. Denise seemed mesmerized by the silverware and china. "In 3 weeks undercover," Eduardo continued, "you were the only person who offered me something without expecting anything in return. That touched me deeply." Eduardo then made an offer that left both visitors speechless. He would pay for Luciana's grandmother's entire treatment at a private clinic, guarantee a full scholarship at one of the best schools in town for the girl, and provide a suitable home for the family. "Why would you do that for us?" asked Luciana, suspicious. Growing up on the streets, she had learned that nothing came without a price. Eduardo smiled. "Let's just say I'm investing in someone who has shown exceptional character." Mrs. Denise nodded enthusiastically, already imagining how she would tell this story to her neighbors. Luciana, however, remained silent, studying the man in front of her intently. The following week, Luciana's grandmother was transferred to a specialized clinic. For the first time in months, the girl saw her smile when the doctors explained that her treatment had a real chance of success. The new school, however, proved to be a greater challenge than Luciana had expected. With her new uniform but strong accent and darker skin than most of the students, she quickly became the target of mean comments. "What charity program brought you here?" asked a blonde girl on the first day, prompting laughter. "Her mother's program," Luciana replied instantly, surprising herself with the speed of her response. The only person who treated her with genuine kindness was Miss Helena, who taught literature. After finding Luciana hiding in the library during recess, she sat down next to her. "You know, when I was your age, I didn't fit in either," she confided. "But I discovered that books can be excellent allies." Gradually, Helena became a mentor to Luciana. Realizing the girl's extraordinary potential, she began lending her advanced books and encouraging her to write. "You have a unique voice," she told her. "And voices like yours need to be heard." Meanwhile, Eduardo Vizcaino was facing problems. His eldest son, Ricardo, the designated heir to the family business, was furious with his father's interest in the girl from the slums, as he called her with disdain. "Dad always had a soft spot for lost social causes," he commented to his mother, Daniela, Eduardo's ex-wife. "First, that ridiculous project in the Amazon, now this girl, and we're the ones who have to deal with the consequences." What Ricardo didn't expect was that Luciana was developing a plan of her own. In the months that followed, while appearing to be just a shy and grateful girl, she watched everything around her closely: the power dynamics of the Vizcaino family, the revealing comments made when they thought she wasn't paying attention, the inconsistencies in Ricardo's stories. With the discreet help of Professor Helena, Luciana devoted herself not only to her formal studies, but also to understanding the Vizcaino empire and its operations. She knew that her position was fragile. A whim of Ricardo or Daniela could cause Eduardo to lose interest in helping her. "Knowledge is power," Helena repeated, unaware of the full extent of what her protégé was absorbing. One rainy afternoon, while waiting in the library for her ride, Luciana accidentally overheard a conversation between Ricardo and an unknown man in an adjacent room. They spoke quietly, but she could clearly make out words such as embezzlement, offshore, and my father will never find out. At that moment, something changed in Luciana's eyes. Behind her curious gaze, a plan began to form silently. If Ricardo saw her as just the girl from the slums, a charity project to appease his father's conscience, he was seriously underestimating who Luciana Ribeiro really was. The same girl who had survived on her own while her grandmother was hospitalized, who had faced the city's toughest streets, and who now had access to something she had never had before: resources. Some people think kindness is weakness, she muttered to herself, slipping quietly away before they could notice her presence. But what happens when someone kind decides they no longer want to be the supporting character in the story of people like Ricardo Vasconcelos? A year had passed since Luciana had overheard that suspicious conversation in the library. At 13, her transformation was remarkable. Not only did she excel in her schoolwork, but she had developed skills that no one would have expected, including fluency in accounting and finance thanks to online courses secretly funded by Professor Helena. I don't understand why a girl your age is so interested in financial statements, Helena commented as she reviewed Luciana's extraordinary work on corporate fraud. But your talent with numbers is undeniable. Luciana just smiled. Let's just say it's a useful skill in the real world. Luciana's grandmother, now recovered and living comfortably in the house provided by Eduardo, noticed subtle changes in her granddaughter. You always seem to be observing, planning something, she commented one evening. I'm just learning, Grandma, Luciana replied, hugging the elderly woman. Learning a lot. What no one realized was that Luciana had created an extensive map of Ricardo's operations. Using the mansion's Wi-Fi during occasional visits, she meticulously documented financial inconsistencies and compromising conversations, storing everything in an encrypted cloud. The opportunity to reveal everything came during Eduardo's 60th birthday, a grand celebration at the Vasconcelos mansion. Impeccably dressed in an outfit chosen by Professor Helena, Luciana watched Ricardo mingle with powerful politicians and businessmen, completely at ease in that privileged environment. Impressive how comfortable you seem here, Ricardo commented acidly, stopping beside Luciana. The champagne in his glass was not the first of the night. Almost as if you belong in this world. Perhaps I belong here more than you realize, Luciana replied calmly. Ricardo laughed dismissively. Look around you, girl. These people, politicians, judges, businessmen, they built this country. No matter how much my father invests in you, you'll always be just the sandwich girl. Luciana's eyes flashed. Interesting that you mention investments, Ricardo. You make a lot of them yourself, don't you? Especially in the Cayman Islands. The champagne glass trembled in Ricardo's hand. What are you talking about? Project Cascada. That's the name of the scheme you set up to divert funds from your father's company, isn't it? Luciana kept her voice low but firm. Documented in emails, bank transfers, and recordings. All while you were negotiating with politicians to block the health projects your father is trying to implement. Ricardo's face paled. You're bluffing, he whispered, looking around nervously. A 13-year-old couldn't. A 13-year-old you completely underestimated, Luciana interrupted. The same slum girl you belittled for a whole year while she watched and learned every detail of your scheme. At that moment, Eduardo approached, his cordial smile masking his confusion at seeing his son and protege in seemingly tense conversation. Is everything all right here? He asked. Perfectly, Luciana smiled. In fact, I was just about to suggest that you, Ricardo, and I have a private conversation in your office. I have something important to share. In Eduardo's elegant office, Luciana connected her tablet to the projection system. Ricardo remained standing rigid as a statue while Eduardo watched, intrigued. What exactly is this, Luciana? Asked Eduardo. The truth, she replied simply before beginning her methodically organized presentation. For a full hour, Luciana exposed Ricardo's elaborate scheme, financial diversions disguised as legitimate investments, offshore accounts, bribes to public officials to block Eduardo's philanthropic initiatives, and even plans to remove his father from the company for incompetence. Impossible, muttered Eduardo, his face a mask of disbelief and pain as documents, emails, and recordings appeared on the screen in flawless sequence. Ricardo, this can't. Shut up, Ricardo shouted, finally losing control. He lunged furiously toward Luciana, only to be restrained by Eduardo. You are nobody. A girl from the slums, a liar who manipulated my father. The difference between us, Ricardo, Luciana replied calmly, is that I never had to lie. Every document here is authentic. Every recording, including the one I just made of your involuntary confession, is real. Eduardo, visibly shaken, sat heavily in his chair. Why, Ricardo? All this? Why? Because you're throwing it all away, exploded Ricardo. Decades building an empire for what? To waste on charity, on street girls, on useless projects that generate no return. Someone had to save this company from you. A deathly silence dominated the room. Eduardo, looking as if he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes, stared at his son as if he were a stranger. I never realized how different we are, he said finally. I built this empire, as you call it, precisely to make the difference I could never make when I was poor. And you've become exactly the kind of person I've fought against my whole life. Turning to Luciana, he asked softly, why didn't you come to me immediately when you found out? Because I needed irrefutable proof, she replied. And because, she hesitated, looking at Ricardo, because I know what it's like to lose family. I didn't want to be responsible for taking your son away from you without absolute certainty. Tears finally streamed down Eduardo's face. With a trembling but determined voice, he turned to Ricardo. Tomorrow you will step away from all operations of the Vasconcelos companies. Your shareholding will be frozen while we thoroughly investigate the extent of the damage. If there is criminal involvement, and there appears to be, you will face the legal consequences. You can't do that, protested Ricardo. I'm your only heir. No, replied Eduardo firmly. An heir is not someone who was born into a family, but someone who honors its values. You had everything, Ricardo. Every opportunity, every privilege, and you chose to use that to destroy what others have built. When Ricardo stormed out of the room, Eduardo remained seated, staring at the wall. Luciana waited silently, unsure of what to say. How? Eduardo finally asked, how did you find out all this? The same way I survived on the streets, she replied simply, by observing, listening, not underestimating anyone. Learning systems to navigate them. Eduardo studied the young woman before him. No longer just a needy child, but an extraordinary person with skills and integrity he had rarely found in adults in positions of power. When we first met, I thought I was helping you, he said finally. I never imagined that one day you would save me. That night, as the lavish party continued downstairs, two people remained in the office, reshaping the future. A billionaire whose vision for his legacy needed to be reimagined, and a girl whose extraordinary journey was just beginning to take shape. Later, in her room, Luciana looked out the window at the brightly lit city. Not long ago, she had been just a hungry girl offering half a sandwich to a stranger. Now, she had irrevocably changed the course of one of the country's greatest fortunes. The question that hung silently in the minds of everyone who witnessed the events of that night was no longer what will become of the girl from the slums that Eduardo Vasconcelos took in, but rather what will happen to the Vasconcelos empire in the hands of someone who understands both the value of money and the value of a single act of kindness. 5 years later, Luciana Ribeiro, now 17, walked confidently through the corridors of the Vasconcelos Foundation. No longer the shy girl who had offered a sandwich to a stranger, she had become a brilliant young woman, respected by employees and executives alike. The scholarship program she had helped create already benefited more than 100 children from poor communities. Meeting at 2 p.m. with the Ministry of Education, reminded Sophia, her assistant. They want to expand the foundation's model to public schools. Luciana nodded, checking her schedule. Across town in a small rented apartment, Ricardo Vasconcelos stared at a pile of unpaid bills. The empire he had planned to inherit was now partly run by the slum girl he had so despised. After the revelations of his crimes, Ricardo faced criminal charges. The deal with the prosecution negotiated by Eduardo to avoid a bigger scandal had left him with a fraction of his fortune and barred him from holding corporate positions for 10 years. His ex-wife and children had cut him off. Your father asked me to see if you need anything, said Eduardo's lawyer during a monthly visit. Ricardo bitterly rejected the offer. His pride was all he had left. In the foundation's main meeting room, Eduardo and Luciana reviewed the quarter's results. Their partnership had evolved into something no one could have predicted, a relationship based on mutual respect and a shared vision. The numbers are impressive, Eduardo commented, analyzing the charts. The financial education program in public schools is already showing concrete results. Because we teach from a real-world perspective, explained Luciana. When you grow up not knowing if you'll have food on the table the next day, you learn to think strategically. We've turned that skill into a teaching tool. Luciana's grandmother, now a community project coordinator, entered the room. At 73, Dona Marta channeled her life wisdom into guiding vulnerable families. The Children's Hospital called, she announced. They want to increase the number of places for specialized treatment. They say our management model has reduced administrative costs by 40%. Eduardo smiled, remembering the day he met Luciana. Who would have thought that half a peanut butter sandwich would be worth so much? Luciana smiled back. It wasn't the sandwich, Eduardo. It was recognizing humanity in someone when everyone else saw only a problem. In the afternoon at the Foundation's annual event, Luciana took the stage to introduce the new class of scholarship recipients. As she spoke, she noticed a familiar figure in the back of the room, Ricardo, thinner and older, watching discreetly. Her words, however, held no resentment. We all face choices that define who we are. Some choose to accumulate power at any cost. Others choose to share what little they have. It is in the small daily choices that we reveal our true nature. After the event, Luciana approached Ricardo, who seemed uncomfortable. I came to apologize, he said, avoiding her gaze. I don't expect forgiveness. It's not about forgiveness, Ricardo, Luciana replied. It's about choosing who we want to be going forward. If you want to contribute in a positive way, there's room for everyone in this work. As Ricardo walked away, Eduardo approached her. You always surprise me, he commented. You offered him an opportunity he doesn't deserve. I learned from you, Luciana replied. When you found me in the square, I didn't deserve your help. You could have given me money and gone on your way. Instead, you saw potential where others would have seen just another statistic. Later in her office, Luciana gazed out the window at the city. It was the same view that had once belonged to Ricardo. The difference was that she didn't see it as a symbol of power, but as a reminder of responsibility. On the wall hung a simple framed photo, half a peanut butter sandwich. A daily reminder that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in what we choose to share when no one is watching. Luciana's journey from the girl who shared her only food to the young woman who transformed systems and created opportunities was not just a story of individual success. It was living proof that when we recognize humanity in every person, regardless of their appearance or condition, we create space for a kind of silent revolution that no amount of money can buy. If this story moved you and you believe that small acts of kindness can transform realities, subscribe to the Black Voices channel for more inspiring stories that remind us of the extraordinary power that exists in the ordinary choices we make every day.